Zia Chapter 10. At the sixth stroke of the ship's bell, I took my bag, which held food, a knife, and a flask of water, and went to the galley door. I had noticed as I sat waiting in the galley that the man on watch had walked the deck on the opposite side of the ship. He had walked to the bow and then to the stern. Then he stayed at each place for several minutes, then walked slowly back. He never walked on the left side of the ship because casks of whale oil were piled there. One of his boots squeaked, and I could hear each step that he took. He was now at the stern. I looked around the corner of the galley door and saw him standing there by the wheel, gazing out at the sea. The ship's ladder hung on from the bulwarks not far from where he stood. I waited in the shadows until I heard the squeak of his boot past the galley door. Quietly, in my bare feet, I slipped out and ran along the deck to the place near the captain's door where I was to meet Mondo. He was not there. I could hear the squeak of the watchman's boot. He had reached the bow of the ship. He would stand there for a short time and then come back. I decided that if Mondo did not come at once, I would go myself. There was a small moon, and I could see the top of the ladder, the two iron hooks that held it to the bulwarks. I ran toward it, climbed it, and found the first step. The sea was dark. The boots were tethered to a long boom at the bottom of the ladder. I heard a sound beneath me as I went down, and as I came to the last rung, I saw a figure crouching in one of the boats. It was Mondo. I saw the dull flash of his knife. He was cutting the rope that held the first of the long boats. It was a boat that the captain used. "Take ours," I whispered to him. "It is the last one out," he answered. Above me, I heard the tread of the watchman moving back from the bow. I jumped into the boat where Mondo was hacking at the rope. "Crouch and make no noise," I said. The watchman passed us and went to the stern. He came back slowly and stopped at the head of the ladder. I held on to Mondo, and both of us did not move until the watchman went on. Then Mondo began to hack at the rope again. "There is a knot in the rope. Have you tried to untie it?" I asked. "I have tried. It is a special knot, and I cannot do nothing with it." "Let us take our boat," I whispered. "What does it matter?" Mondo said. "It is ours," I said, and climbed out of the captain's boat and into the one alongside. Mondo followed me. "A boat is a boat," he said. "Island Girl is smaller and easier to handle," I said to end the argument. We had reached her when I heard the squeak as the watchman moved above us. We crouched until he passed and came back. Then we both hacked hard at the rope that held us to the boom and freed ourselves. I let myself over the side and, kicking my feet, slowly moved the boat to the side of the ship where the watchman did not pass. Above us hung the monstrous heads. We passed a carcass and a second carcass which had been stripped of all its fat. Mondo took hold of the bones and helped me move the boat. Halfway along, I told him to shove us away. We left the carcass moving. We tied with the tide and the waves in the direction of the island. Mondo was in the water beside me. If the watchman had passed along our side of the ship, he could have seen us. Still, if he had looked toward the island when he stood at the bow or the stern, he could have seen us too, even though we were moving slowly and quietly, grasping the rudder. When the first light showed in the east, we reached the kelp bed that surrounded the island. The kelp was heavy, and we could not push through it. We climbed in the boat and lay there, resting and trying to get warm. I looked off toward the coast. It was dim and far away. "The tide is against us," I said. "We will rest and wait for a while. But we should go on. They will be out looking for us, and the first place they will look will be here." "It is another hour before breakfast," Mondo said. "They will eat and go on deck. It will be 2 hours before anyone will notice that a boat is missing. Maybe it will be longer. I wondered if, after all, he wanted to be caught and taken back to the ship. The cook will miss me in the galley, I said, and the captain will miss you when his morning tea is not brought on the silver tray. They will know we are gone before the hour is out. I looked out again at the distant shore. It was too far away to see the sand dunes or the waves breaking. The island was between us and the ship, and I could not see her either. It was then that I noticed the rudder. It was made of 3 oar-shaped slats, each one longer than my arm, and fastened to the boat with the light iron stripes. I dug my knife into the wood and saw that we could free the bolts and that held it. By the time the sun was rising, we had the rudder off. The 3 slats were held together by 2 wooden pegs. We broke them loose and had 2 pieces that we could use as paddles. Vámonos, I said. The wind is with us, and the tide soon will be. Mando looked over his shoulder in the direction of the ship. Slowly, he put his paddle in the water, and we set out for the distant shore. When the sun was well up, we had cleared the island, and we could see 3 masts of the ship on the horizon. The makeshift paddles were not as good as oars, but we were gaining headway nonetheless. The tide and the wind were with us, and the mainland now was clear. I could see the tower of Mission Ventura. Mando was torn between the shore and the ship. He kept looking back over his shoulder until the topmost mast disappeared. From time to time, even then, he would look back and sigh. "You are sorry," I said, "that they did not send out their longboats and catch us." "Nothing happens at the mission," he said. "You work in the fields and clean the weeds out of the water ditches and sweep up the courtyard and light the candles. On the Boston Boy, you would carry tea to the captain." "That is all," I replied. "It is not much, but if you want to be a sailor, Father Vicente will see that you find a place on one of the ships. Maybe a ship where you will be a sailor and not a servant." I had never been on this Ventura shore before in a boat. It looked like the shore at Santa Barbara, farther up the coast. But there was a spit of land that ran out that had a rocky point. Between the spit and the shore was a cave. The water seemed to be quiet there, and the breakers smaller than they were farther to the south. It was this cave that I aimed for. As we approached the breakers and were squaring the boat, holding it back as best as we could to catch one of the smaller waves, a current caught us. It had foam around its edges and was running swift in a line with the beach toward the rocky spit. "Paddle hard away from the shore," I shouted to my brother. "That way we may be free for ourselves from the current." We both put all our strength into turning the boat away from the breakers, thinking that we could wait until the current let us free. But the current, with its white edges, held the boat and bore us past the cave and toward the rocks as if we were a chip of wood. "Be ready to jump," I said. We were both good swimmers, and as the boat struck the rocks and keeled over, we jumped. The water was cold. For a while, we had to fight the tide that had swept us into the rocks. The rocks were too slippery to cling to, and the barnacles cut my hands. Finally, we both freed ourselves from the rocky ledge and the tide and struck out for the beach, which was not far. Dozens of Indians were there on the beach as we staggered ashore. We were scratched and bruised, but we were alive. It was sad to see the island girl pounded by the waves, slowly drifting towards us. The Indians gave us dry clothes and some bowls of clam soup and dried beef. We were exhausted and slept all afternoon and that night. In the morning, Captain Nidiver rode up to talk to us. "If there is anything left of the island girl," I told him, "it is yours if you want it." The boat had washed ashore and was in splinters. "There's good wood left in her," he said. "I can use it." I handed him the compass, which I had wrapped in oilskin before we left the ship and wore around my neck. He unwrapped it and took some directions. "Good as new," he said. "Never thought I'd get it back. I'll use it when I go to the island of the blue dolphins." "When?" I said. "Soon." "When?" I asked again. "Maybe in 3 months, maybe sooner, maybe later." "Can I go with you?" "We'll see," he said, putting the compass in his jacket. "Women aren't good luck on a ship." I brought the Boston boy good luck. They harpooned 4 whales while I was aboard the ship. "Boston boy?" He looked surprised, so I told him that what had happened to us on the whaler. When I had finished the story, he still looked surprised. "You're lucky you didn't end up in Boston," he said. "Can I go with you?" I asked him again. "I'll think it over," he said.